welcome to Editing in the Short Fiction Magazine Industry panel. My name is Angelica Fife, my pronouns are she, her, or any, and I'm an editor over at Lunar Station Quarterly. I'll be the moderator today for this panel. This panel will cover what editing in the speculative fiction magazine industry is like, as well as what trials or struggles might be involved, how editors might choose their best stories, what tools they might use for the job, and more. Our panelists will offer their own answers and experiences with editing from their respective publications. There should be time at the end for us to take questions from the audience too, so if you have anything you'd like to ask while you're listening, be sure to save them up until then and put them in the Discord chat, which should be in the Houdini A channel. So we'll start off with introductions. We'll do Amy first, if that's all right.
My name is Amy Ogden, and I'm a science fiction and fantasy writer, as well as the co-editor of Translunar Travelers Lounge, which is a relatively new semi-pro magazine that looks for fun and optimistic speculative fiction.
Okay, then we'll do Julia next.
Hi, I'm Julia Rios. I am the editor of Mermaids Monthly, a magazine all about mermaids.
Wendy?
I am Wendy Nickel, and I write science fiction and fantasy, and I just very recently stepped into the editor-in-chief position at Flash Fiction Online. So we specialize in very short 500 to 1,000 word stories in not only science fiction, fantasy, and horror, but also we delve into the literary genre as well.
And Zelda. Oh.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, my computer's a little slow. I'm Zelda Knight. I'm also a writer of sci-fi and fantasy romance, editor and a bookseller. Currently, I run 2 quarterlies, Helios and Selene, that deals broadly with genre fiction, but mostly sci-fi, fantasy, and horror.
Okay, so first topic is, what is editing like for your respective publications? We'll start with Amy again.
So like I said, we're a magazine that looks for fun and optimistic fiction. We really want that fiction to be fun for as many different people as possible, in as many different ways as possible. So we're always trying to find a balance between laugh out loud humor and pieces that are perhaps difficult but moving and have some hope in the ending. We want people to come away feeling uplifted but not exhausted. So there's a fine line there, and we accept from I guess 0 words would be our minimum, up to 5,000. If anyone sends me a 0-word story, the title would have to be very, very good. But anything in that range, and we try and balance this very short, bite-sized fiction and all the way up to 5,000 words. We kind of structure our issues as tasting menus, so we want to have a whole variety of entrees to tempt people with too. So finding all those balances is fun and exciting.
Hey, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I ducked back in because the stream isn't working yet.
Okay.
So you were supposed to be live to an audience. It says live, but it isn't actually going. So I'm going to stop and try to restart it, okay?
Should we go from the top again then?
Yeah, I apologize.
That's fine.
All right, I've stopped it. You're not in front of the audience yet. Here we go. Let me get this info back in, and hopefully this time it will work. Okay.
Does anyone see a hand raised?
If you hover over the list in the participant's right-hand side, you should be able to raise your hand that way. Or you can do it on the screen.
Okay, I'm going to click go. Ready? Go.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Welcome to the Editing in the Short Fiction Magazine Industry panel. My name is Angelica Fife. My pronouns are she, her, or any. I'm an editor over at LSQ, Lunar Station Quarterly, and I'll be your moderator today for this panel. This panel will cover what editing in the speculative fiction magazine industry is like, as well as what trials or struggles might be involved, how editors might choose their best stories, what tools they might use for the job, and more. Our panelists will offer their own answers and experiences with editing from their perspective with their respective publications. There should be time at the end for us to take questions from the audience as well, so please save them up to the end. And you should be able to chat in the Houdini Aid channel for that. So we'll start with introductions, and we'll just go alphabetically from first names. We'll start with Amy first.
My name is Amy Ogden, and I am the co-editor at Translunar Travelers Lounge, which is a relatively new semi-pro magazine dedicated to fun and optimistic speculative fiction.
And Julia next.
I'm Julia Rios. I'm the editor at Mermaids Monthly, which is a magazine all about mermaids.
Wendy.
I am Wendy Nickel, and I just recently stepped into the editor-in-chief position at Flash Fiction Online. So we specialize in stories between 500 and 1,000 words in science fiction, fantasy, horror, and as well as literary.
And lastly, we have Zelda.
Everyone, I'm Zelda. I'm a writer of sci-fi and fantasy romance. I'm also an editor and bookseller. I currently edit 2 quarterlies that are coming to an end, Helios and Selene, and it's nice to meet y'all.
Okay, so we've already said a bit of this in introductions, but what is editing like for each of you with your respective publications? We'll start again with Amy, and move on to Julia, then Wendy, then Zelda.
So at Translunar Travelers Lounge, we are dedicated to fun and optimistic fiction, and we want that fiction to be fun for as many different people as possible. So we're always trying to strike a balance, first of all, between what I like and what my co-editor Bennett North likes, and where each issue pulls each of us, and then also things that are genuinely laugh out loud funny versus things that might be difficult or moving but have a hopeful, happy ending, because we want readers to walk away feeling uplifted but never exhausted after reading one of our issues. And we also we accept anything. I think the shortest story we've published was around 450 words, and we accept up to 5,000. And so we try and find a nice balance between flash and longer stories. We do structure our issues like a tasting menu, so we want to have lots of different sized options to feed our guests in the lounge.
Mermaids Monthly, we basically were taking stories all about mermaids. We also accept comics, and there's art. I am not the art director, but I do make decisions on comics. So there's some sort of overlap there. I work closely with my assistant editor, Ashley Dung, and also with my art director, Meg Frank, to sort of decide what the content is going to be like. And we sort of come up with concepts for each issue, whether it's explicitly themed or not. So some of our issues, like the February issue, was Mermaids in Space, and that was very strongly themed, but other issues don't necessarily have a central theme, but we're still kind of looking for things that will go together and feel cohesive as a whole. So when you come to that issue, especially if you're looking at the PDF, which is what Meg designs as like the best possible version of it, it will look like a fully integrated piece that's coherent all the way through. And I think that's probably one of the big things about how editing feels for this specific magazine.
I'm up next, I guess. Yeah, actually, that was one of the things I was going to bring up, that this is still very new to me. I just started as editor-in-chief in January, so I've only got a couple issues under my belt here, but so far that's one of the things that I've been really enjoying, is putting together that cohesive issue. You have these stories that you love, that you've accepted, and that you're excited about, and figuring out how to balance them out and kind of set them up so that they complement each other is something that I found that I've really enjoyed.
And similarly, I've been editing for 5 years now, so it's been a long time. And I think for me, both of my magazines, Helios and Celine, they deal with genre fiction. One more focused on speculative fiction, and one a mixture of mystery and a kind of crime fiction, and also speculative fiction. I think the biggest thing for me is that for these two magazines, they are always unthemed. So I'm always just getting a bunch of stories and basically saying, okay, what's going to work together? And I also publish a wide variety. I've published drabbles that are like 100 words all the way up to novellas. So it's a really huge spectrum of different literature that comes in, and my job is always to obviously reject things, but also come up with something that doesn't just feel like slapped together. I don't really know what I'm reading, even if each issue is technically unthemed.
I think most of ours end up being unthemed aside from our December issues when we have special themed ones. Okay, so next, what does editing for a magazine entail? Like, what tasks do you necessarily have to do? Do you just proofread stories, or do you review them, provide feedback, that kind of thing?
Me and Bennett both read all of our submitted stories. We divide it in half, and so we read all of our inbox ourselves. We don't have any slush readers at this point. We go through and each make first round decisions and send them to the other editor for further consideration. And then from those two separate piles, we get to a final list that we have to pare down an issue from. Other than that, we try to send some personal responses, but for the most part, the editing is focused on yes, proofreading, but also we do developmental editing to some extent when we have a story that we really love that isn't there yet. If that's the one we want. We don't want a perfect story if it's not the one that's talking to our heart. We want the author to take that story to the place they want it to be at, and where we can see it going, and put that out in the world. We do some of that, and it varies a lot issue to issue, how much time is spent on that versus strict proofreading. And then Bennett also does our art for the covers, which they are so amazing, and I'm really impressed and jealous and awed of what they can do. And then there's all the social media tasks, trying to promote issues and stories, and make sure people get contracts and get paid. That's important too.
Yes, making sure people get contracts and get paid is one of the major jobs that I want to make sure happens at Mermaids Monthly. I'm not always the person who's doing that. We do have a logistics wizard who is Liz Hoolan-Wheeler, and she works for the post office, and so she fulfills all of our Kickstarter backer rewards, but also has been doing contracts for us. So sort of kind of in the role of managing editor, what I think most other magazines would call a managing editor, is some of the things that Liz has been taking on. But I also do a lot of it myself. So if Liz is creating a contract and sending it to an author, I might be countersigning the contract and sending it back to them, and also collecting their bio and their photo and filing all of those in a special Google Drive, and also then taking their piece and making sure, like, is it just proofreading? No, it's probably not. Sometimes it is. Sometimes a piece comes in and it's absolutely perfect, like it's just clean and there aren't even any typos, but this is a very, very rare occurrence. And I think that most of the time there's some sort of medium ground where it's like a little bit proofreading and a little bit hey, I had a question about this part because I didn't really fully understand what was happening. Can you make it clearer? That kind of comment is definitely in there. I tend to not do major developmental editing in the once the story has been accepted. If I think something needs major structural changes, I'm more likely to send a revise and resubmit request or a conditional acceptance that says, I'd love to accept this if you're willing to work with me on making some substantial changes to the story. Because usually from my standpoint as an editor, and I know this can vary from place to place and person to person, if I've actually accepted a piece, I want to be sure that if I were to send editing suggestions and the author refused all of them, I'd still be happy to publish the piece. So at the point that I've actually accepted a story, like I'm expecting that the changes are going to be minimal, or I will have told the person up front, hey, there are some things that I definitely want to change. So yeah, I guess that's the answer to the question. I also saw a question in the chat about whether we take things other than mermaids like selkies, and the answer to that is yes, we take other things than mermaids.
All right, so our process at Flash Fiction Online, I'm actually really grateful. I inherited a system and slush readers and managing editors and a publisher, and so I actually don't handle the money side of things. I don't want to touch that part. That's on our publisher, Annie Yates, who she is amazing and takes care of all of that for us. And so my specific area really is the creative content. So how we have it set up is because we have slush readers, they all read through every story that comes into Flash Fiction online gets 3 reads at least. So 3 people read it. If it's something that those readers think deserves another look, then they pass it up to our senior editors. And they are the ones that then, have been around a little longer and are more familiar with the magazine. And so they pick and choose out of there. We generally have like 12 to 20 every month that then goes into winnowing, which is kind of our second round submission. And I don't know that I've heard of any other magazine that does it similarly, but basically what we do is we put the stories out there and everyone on the staff can go and read it and share their opinions on it. So it's one of my favorite parts because everyone gets their favorite ones, and they kind of champion them and basically try to convince the editor this is one that we need to buy, this is one that we need to get out into the world and see published. So that's really exciting for me. So basically I then end up taking all of their thoughts and ideas and suggestions and edit and break it down to, okay, what is going to be the best fit for our magazine, and what changes need to be made for clarity's sake, or just to kind of polish it up just that little bit. And yeah, then once it's all accepted and everything go through, then I get to go and put them in and set up the issues. So that's kind of my side of things. I'm also in charge of the personnel side of things and hiring on new slush readers and organizing all of that stuff. So it's been a fun adventure and a new challenge for me.
So for me, I'm a one-woman shop, so I get the task of doing everything but editing most of the time. So how issues usually start out for the year, because it's quarterlies, I find an artist and basically purchase 4 pieces of art that I find attractive or look nice. Once I have the art, I open the call and say, hey, submit your stories. These are the guidelines. This is the pay rate. Um, Then I go through every story myself. Some submission cycles have been only a few, but usually it averages around 200, 300. So it's a lot of submissions to go through. So with that being said, I very rarely give personal feedback because every editor is different, and what I might see as something that might be an issue or something to develop, the next editor might, eat it up like candy. So most of the time, unless it's something like amazing and I'm just like I just can't accept it, but maybe this will help, I very rarely give personal feedback. I'm kind of also of the philosophy that I don't accept something I don't think um will need a lot of editing done, only because at that point, you can run into conflict of if the writer does reject a lot of it, and then I don't feel comfortable publishing it. But then other than that, it's mostly just admin tasks, contracts, payment, tracking stuff, and getting it up there and distributed.
Okay, yeah. At Lunar Station Quarterly, we tend to work like Wendy does, with our editing team being put through different rounds of reading to sort of see whether it's suitable for the magazine or not. And we just have a question about that, saying, do you all have specific ways of hiring Slush readers for those that have Slush readers? So does anyone want to go first? Otherwise, probably go with Wendy, because I know you have them.
I'll jump in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is something that we're trying out, kind of different. So we just went through our first round here, where rather than kind of just throwing people into the fire, we've been putting together, me and some of my senior editors have been putting together kind of a Slush reader training course, where the first 3 months of Slush reading, we walk you through, okay, hey, what is it that we are looking for specifically at Flash Fiction Online? What are things that work? What are things that don't work? You know, last week we were talking about conflict and character, and basically trying to give back to our Slush readers the knowledge and skills and vocabulary that they need in order to vocalize and tell us, okay, hey, I think this one is good, but it's just got this one little thing, or this one's not working and this is why. So it's kind of a new project that we're doing. We have on our website, there's a link on the top with the menu somewhere that you can sign up. And basically, we've had for January, February, March, our quarter one, we had 8 new Slush readers to kind of throw them in, and it was kind of neat to see them do some team building and looking at how different people see the different stories in different ways, and how writers can break these rules and still have it work. And so now we are in our second round of that. So the next time we'll be looking for Slush readers again is for July, August, and September. So if you sign up now, we've got a Google form. And so when it gets closer to that, I'll just look through the form and pick out, okay, who are people that, not only do I think they can help us in giving us maybe a different perspective than we've seen before, or, maybe they have expertise in some area that the rest of us don't, or lived experiences, but also people that, okay, hey, this is someone that looks like they are really interested in learning more and deepening their understanding of the industry, and how, especially because we are so focused there, Flash fiction and how it works, and what makes it so awesome.
And I can speak a little bit about this. I don't have Slush readers at Mermaids Monthly. We just have a staff of 4. It's me, Liz, Ashley, and Meg. And of the 4 of us, Meg reads everything once we've accepted it. So once we know what's going to be in the magazine, that's when Meg actually does read everything. And Meg reads everything very carefully to select the art that goes with it. Before that, Liz and Ashley and I read all the submissions together, and we talk to each other about what we think. We do the same winnowing process where it's like, what do we think is the best? What do we want to keep in a second round and then consider further? And then we talk to each other and come to a conclusion about what we're going to accept. In other magazines that I've worked for, because I've actually been editing professionally since 2012, and I started at Strange Horizons, they have a ton of first readers. And the way that they select first readers is by having them go through a rigorous application process with a test where you read a bunch of like test stories, test submissions, and decide which ones you would save for a second round and explain why. And Strange Horizons also has everyone make a little summary of what the story was about for each time. I don't know if they're still doing this because I haven't worked there since 2015, but back when I was there, this was how they did it. And every single story that gets read, the person who reads it actually like summarizes what's it about for everyone else to see. And then stories that get into a second round get read by more people. This is a similar system to what we were doing when I was working at Fireside, although I don't know what they're doing now because, again, I don't work there. And I think things, every time you get a new editorial team, things change. But in those cases, I think at Fireside as well, there was a question period where it was like, okay, you can apply to this and you tell us about like what kinds of stories you enjoy to read and see how much your taste matches the editorial team's taste. And then there's a lot of conversation. So at Strange Horizons, it was all via email. When I was working at Fireside, it was all in a Slack and everyone would sort of talk to each other about the stories there. Mermaids Monthly, we do have both email and a Slack, so we can talk. I think we talk mostly about stories in Slack, but we also have email if we need it. And we are not planning to hire more first readers for Mermaids Monthly because at Mermaids Monthly, we want to pay everybody who works for us and we can't, our budget just won't support paying more staff. So it's just going to be us four.
Okay, so next, wondering about deadlines that everyone has. How do you manage meeting deadlines for your issue releases? Do you have any sort of tips for keeping to them and getting them done on time?
We are a 2-person operation, and so we do have a long submission open to issue published cycle. It's about 5 months, and that just gives us time that when inevitably, as happens with the two-person operation, something hits a fan somewhere, we have time to absorb that and still get contracts out on time, get edits out on time, format everything for the site on time, and get it up and ready to go. That's the only reason that we're able to do it is that we have a long lead time that we can work around. And since it is a 2-person operation, a lot of it is peer pressure. Like, hey, we need to schedule a date for talking about first round stories. Hey, let's have edits to everybody by this date. And so that guilt is a powerful motivator for me. And I think I can't let Bennett have to do everything, so I have to get this much done by this date, or I will live in shame for the rest of my life. And that perhaps that's not the best motivating factor, but it works for me. It's worked for 37 years so far, so I'll keep going with it.
I think for us, we explicitly have flexible deadlines, so we don't have a day that we announce in advance that the issue will come out. We do commit to one issue each month, but we do not say it will be published on the 1st or the 15th or anything like that. And we do that specifically because we know everyone has different rhythms in their lives, different things might come up. We have various things to navigate, whether they're family situations or health situations, and you never know when something like that is going to throw things off. And you also, like, Meg is in school full time in art school, so like also juggling things like their final schedule and other big projects for school. So we want to make sure everyone has enough time to do everything. And what we do usually is set out a timeline at the beginning where we're like, okay, this is how much time we think by this time, hopefully we'll be in this stage. There's a big set of steps that every issue has to go through production wise, including proofreading and art design, and when do I have to have the edited content in so that we can get the art design done in time, et cetera, et cetera. And we try to hit those steps, but if we miss them, it's okay because we've said ahead of time it is okay, specifically if we don't, maybe we're hoping that we're going to have it ready by X date, but we're not telling anybody publicly that, and if it doesn't get done till a week later, that's not going to be a problem. No one's going to be let down. So that's basically our approach.
So I use lots of spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets, and that's basically how I keep organized right now. I've got a spreadsheet that lists like every single, editorial related task that I need to do for the whole month, and they each get crossed out. And the other thing really is our editorial team. We've got 3 senior editors that are basically my like personal assistants. They're amazing, that they are just awesome and willing to jump in where needed. So when those things come up that, okay, hey, I don't have time to do this, or this is falling behind here, I know that I can call on them. And one of them is always willing to, one or two or three or all of them are always willing to like step in and pick up the slack. So yeah, that's been really amazing, just finding that balance with our team there and figuring out, okay, what can we do to share the load?
And I will be giving what not to do so you can meet these deadlines. So if you're like me and you're on a really small budget, a small team or one person shop, I would really recommend this beautiful do not publicly announce when you're going to release an issue. It's really going to put a lot of unnecessary pressure on yourself. Another thing before, so just to backtrack a bit, in 2019, I had a major health crisis, so that threw a lot of stuff off with my own publications. But before that, what I would try to do is basically do things in batches. So I would know, like, I have my work schedule, I have my school schedule, et cetera, et cetera. And so I would block out a time and say, I need to purchase all 4 covers for the year by this date. I need to get all the stories under this length done by this date. And so doing things in batches made it much more manageable, because when you're taking care of every aspect of a magazine, you're really at that point putting on multiple hats, let alone the publicity and other aspects after publication. So I think batching has been really helpful for me. Almost like if you're someone that writes better at night, you always block out a certain amount of time if you can at night to write. Do the same thing. I do the same thing when it comes to editing magazines.
We've got a question in the chat about how do you handle the never-ending nature of selecting, editing, and publishing stories? Which kind of ties into the next 2 questions about the life story from acceptance to publication and how we choose to accept submissions. So we'll start with Amy again and go back down.
Sure. I suppose that question is asking whether it becomes like monotonous to do this. And for me, 5 issues into Translunar Traveler's Lounge, absolutely not. I love finding new gems in the inbox every time. It feels like treasure hunting for me. Like, is this the story that's going to make me cry today? I really hope it is. I hope this is the one. A good cathartic cry story is always going to land with me. A humor, something that makes my day. That I live for that. That's so much fun to find those. And it's also a lot about finding what's the best fit for us, and what is a translunar story and not somebody else's story. We've rejected things that have gone on to be published at pro markets like Strange Horizons or Diabolical Plots, and they were good stories, and they great stories even, but they weren't us stories. And so figuring out what that is, and what we want to sound like is really fun for me, and how all the pieces fit together. Yeah, I think that's, yeah. Was there another part to that? There was a big question. Well, move on to somebody else should talk. I was a lot of talking.
I think the other part of the question was, what is the life of a story from acceptance to publication? And actually, Amy, if you want to answer, like, what does your story life look like? I would love to hear your version first.
Sure. Yeah. So from acceptance, once Bennett and I have agreed, we make sure we have a whole table of contents laid out that we agree on before we send out acceptances, and then we wait to hear back from the author, send out a contract, and when we get that back, it usually takes us a few weeks to go through all the stories, and we both read through each accepted story and compile edit notes that we send back to the author. We usually wait until we have them all done, and set a deadline based on when we finished getting the edit notes out for when we hope to get them back from the authors. And we're usually fairly flexible on that, because if I need to, I can make formatting happen in the back end of the website real fast. But we then we work sometimes back and forth a little bit. Sometimes it's very easy edits, and we get those back. We put them into the WordPress website that we use, format them. Sometimes we have like cool formatting stuff, and then we get to like text each other back and forth, and how can I make this right a line and this part left a line? And that's an adventure always. And then Bennett also does the cover art, which we have on our landing page for each new issue. And they do the ebook formatting, because I am not smart and I don't know how to do that. They get that so that people can buy books to read on their Kindle or Nook or what have you. And then after it's out, we do the promo slowly but surely.
For Mermaids Monthly, the life cycle of a story. So, okay, there were three questions in there. There was the question of how do we deal with the never-ending cycle? And the answer for me is I can't seem to stay away from it. I started in 2012. I've actually quit multiple times, and then I just keep accidentally stumbling back and doing more editing because I can't stop, because I love it and find it compelling. So I would say for me, it's a passion project. But the life cycle of a story from acceptance to publication, first it's deciding which stories to accept. I don't actually have a table of contents in mind when I send out acceptances. It's basically, do I love this story? Yes or no. And I might have certain things where we've discussed, like, oh, we know a theme is coming up, or we see a theme that could emerge from a few stories we like. So then we'll like look for more stories that suit that. And so some things might loosely tie with different potential table of contents, but we don't usually say, like, I know what the table of contents is before I send out my round of acceptances. We're mostly doing that based on, like, do we love these stories? And if yes, how many of them can we afford to actually accept and pay for? Then once we accept a story, the first thing we do is send the acceptance, ask the person how their name and address should appear on a contract. Then we send them a contract. Once the contract is signed, we actually then would go into the editing stage. And usually it's me, but a couple of times we've gone ahead and assigned those to someone else on staff, Liz or Ash, if it's a story that they really loved and they want to have the experience of editing it, then we're doing that. So I think in the May issue, 2 stories that Ash edited will actually be in that issue. So that's really exciting. And then when that happens, usually when I edit, will take the author's document and insert comments into it. So I'll use, if it's like a Word document, I'll use the insert comment feature. And I won't actually change their text. I'll usually just leave the comment and then I'll send it back to them and I'll say, hey, here are the comments. You can go ahead and make the changes yourself or reply to the comments if you don't agree with them or whatever, and then send it back to me. I usually give them a pretty short deadline because usually there aren't major changes that I think are going to take a whole lot of work. So I usually give them maybe a week. And I always say, of course, if you need more time, just let me know. But I found for most people, having a deadline helps them to feel like, oh, this is a time that I need to get it done. So I'll do it. Because usually, even if it's only going to take you like an hour to go through something, if you don't have that deadline and you have 15 other things that you do have deadlines for, you can easily just like not get around to it. So yeah, I usually give a deadline knowing that like if that deadline doesn't work out, that's totally fine. We can manage to get a different deadline. I'm not trying to be really hard on anyone, but I want to get things done. And then once we get that back, I give the final version to Meg. Meg puts the issues together. So once Meg has the full layout together, even if it's not complete, then Meg will send the staff an internal proof copy. And this is usually a PDF version that might not have everything finalized, like the titles and the table of contents might not even be there. But the stories and the poems and the comics will be there. Maybe not all the art will be there. Maybe different parts of it might not be finished, but we'll look over what is there and say, oh, hey, we've noticed these mistakes. Like, so let's fix those. Like we noticed a typo in this story, or we spelled this author's name wrong, or whatever. We really, really double check the names because it is the worst to spell an author's name wrong. And this has happened to me before, and it is just terrible. There was one point when I was editing an anthology, and the author Leah Sipes, it turns out that the word will just autocorrect that to Cypress, and then it won't tell you that it's spelled wrong because Cypress is a word. So that went all the way to print. And that was not great. We got our arcs back and we're like, oh, this author's name is spelled wrong. We need to do a different edition. So that was not ideal. And that's one thing to really check for. So that's when we do the internal staff checking. Then we send it to Meg does the corrections, adds a little bit more to the design. It might not be all the way final, but at this point it's close to final, and we send it to the contributors, and they have a chance to look it over to see if they have any errors that they've noticed. Ideally, at this stage, it's not going to be like, oh, I've decided I don't like the ending of my story, so I'm going to rewrite it. It's more like, hey, I noticed that I spelled the word chocolate wrong on page 12. Like, that's a typo that I didn't catch. If we get those, we correct them, and there usually are a handful. It turns out no matter how many times and no matter how many people go over a text, usually there are still mistakes. So it just somehow they multiply and they're always there. So if you see something in a finished thing that has mistakes, like just know that it's because we've all worked on it multiple times, and despite all of our best efforts, sometimes I think you get too close to material and you just see what your eyes think should be there instead of what actually is on the page. But we try with a multiple step process to get rid of as many errors as we can. And then after that final proof is done, then Meg does a final pass on the design and we have an actual issue. So that's the whole life cycle.
So I think the life cycle of the accepted story kind of starts in that winnowing phase, because we usually end up with like 5 or 6 stories that I'm just kind of not really willing to let go yet, but not really sure, okay, is this going to be one that actually makes it? So what I tend to do at that phase is I download Word documents of them, and I start kind of making editorial notes of like, okay, assuming I'm going to buy, to accept this, what would I need to work out? And there's been some stories that I just stare at the page and I'm like, I don't know, this is just isn't quite right, but I don't know what to tell the author. And so those ones I know, you know what, I'm just not the right editor for that then. And then there's other ones that I'm like, okay, cool, like I got this. I, can send this to the author, and that's great. So that's kind of my last step in determining, okay, what's going to make the cut here is what can I as an editor, help polish up and not insert too much of my own sell for my own writing into, but just kind of help the author bring out those things that are really important to the story. So from there, what I've been doing, the process right now anyways, is I've been sending that Word document to the author saying, hey, I'd like to accept this. Can you take a look at this? Make sure that my vision matches your vision, that there isn't anything in the edits that, you know, you don't want to see. So just to kind of make sure that we're on the same page with those revisions. And then we do those. I upload a clean copy to Submittable so that they can check on it and see it and do that double check, make sure that everything is, you know, how it all should be. And then I send the contract over, and we have a author info survey that I also have been sending that just kind of gives us information about the author, things like their bio, uploading a picture, their pronouns, things that we don't then have to go back and ask later. So yeah, Twitter, and Facebook account, you know, accounts, their website, all of that good stuff. So then it's all in one nice spreadsheet, again with the spreadsheets. So then from there, Anna, our publisher, does her magic. And actually, I missed a step there because I figure out what issues we want to put it in. So like for right now, I have, I think, the next 3 issues completely filled out. And then I have the list of stories that are still not in an issue, but I have some of them grouped together where I see certain themes emerging or similarities, or, you know, this one kind of spins on a theme that's in this other one. So that'd be kind of neat to group those 2 together. So right now I'm working like 5-6 months ahead. So yeah, working on those autumn and winter stories. And yeah, so then once I get that list to our publisher, then she works her magic. And our reprint editor, Samantha, she also does amazing things with ebooks and putting stuff up on Amazon, and that's not my forte, so I don't actually know how they do that all. I just trust them to do it.
And I'll just say quickly, so I did say the very first step is getting cover art because I don't create it myself. I go on ArtStation, usually sometimes Deviant or find an artist I like, get a quote from them, buy all the covers for the year. Then I do an open call. It's usually 15 days. I've had complaints that it's too short, but again, I'm the only one reading and I still somehow get over 100 submissions, so I'm fine with that. After that, from that open call, I cull the full year of stories. So I don't have multiple open calls. It's once a year, and I get all the stories for the year from there and group them together based on thematic things, or maybe it's too much horror here, or this is way too long, so it needs some shorter things like that. And then after the fact, I usually put them up behind a paywall. I also run off a WordPress site. And after like now stuff that's 5 years old, that's just going to be free because I mean, it's been a long time. It needs to be out there. And for formatting, I very much have fallen in love with vellum formatting, and Calibre was a pain in the butt. Now I just drop something in and it just creates voila ebooks and PDFs. So it's amazing for me. There's also Atticus, I think, coming out for Windows, so you have a similar experience at uploading places. But yeah, I think like I talked about before, batching is really important for me because I don't have a lot of time to, have multiple open calls, try to work with stuff. It's whatever I get, I make some issues out of it.
Okay, so that's all we've got time for. So if we just go through where you can find each other at, that would be helpful. We'll start with Amy and go down again.
You can find us at TransLunarTL on Twitter, or the website is translunartravelerslounge.com. There's only one L in travelers. It can be tricky. I put the link in the chat in the Flights of Foundry Discord if anyone wants. I'll put it again so you don't have to scroll back up, but that's where you can find us.
You can find Mermaids Monthly at mermaidsmonthly.com or at Mermaids Monthly on Twitter. I'm at OMG Julia on Twitter, and I also publish some stories on my Patreon that will be linked from my Twitter.
And we are at flashfictiononline.com. I believe our Twitter is at flashfictionmag because online has too many letters. But yeah, all of those links, if you go to our website, will be there. And I'll
You
put it
can
in the Discord as well.
Oops, sorry, Wendy. And very soon you'll be able to find the full archive, the full run, all 5 years of Helios Quarterly at heliosquarterly.com, and it will take you to the main website for my publishing house. And then the full run of Celine Quarterly is coming soon, and that will be celinequarterly.com as well.
And you can find Lunar Station Quarterly at lunarstationquarterly.com or on Twitter at Lunar Quarterly. You can find me on Twitter at Alatheride is my Discord username as well. It's a bit odd, but I'll put the links in the chat as well. And that wraps up this panel. If you have any more questions, feel free to DM me on Discord. Or contact on Twitter. Check out everyone's publications, obviously, and thank you for the questions. Thank you for the panelists for coming. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the convention as well.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.